The king himself desired that Vasco should have that post. It being so arranged, the brothers recommended one Nicholas Coelho, a very intimate friend of theirs, to command the third ship, and to this Don Manuel readily assented. The preparations for the voyage now went rapidly forward. The three ships had already been named the San Miguel, the San Gabriel, and the San Rafael, and with them was to go a fourth vessel, loaded with provisions. But it was not intended that this vessel should accompany them to the end of the voyage. Vasco da Gama selected the sailors with great care, and, when he had done so, he told them to make use of the time before the ships set out in learning to be carpenters, rope makers, caulkers, blacksmiths, and plank makers. For these pure poses he provided them with a quantity of tools, and, to their delight, he also increased their pay. In all, there were about 150 sailors. Vasco da Gama himself took command of the San Rafael, Paulo da Gama, of the San Gabriel, and Nicholas Coelho, of the San Miguel. Large and imposing as these ships seemed to the Portuguese of that day, they were only about 120 tons each. Late in March, 1497, everything had been got ready, and it now only remained to receive the blessings of the church, to bid adieu to the court and to anxious friends, to leave the scenes and comforts of home behind, and to sail out upon the stormy and unknown seas. Was a bright Sunday morning in spring, and the quaint, narrow streets and spacious squares of Lisbon were full of something unusual, evidently, was going forward. The old city had the aspect of a holiday, and the multitudes, gaily dressed, were all flocking hurriedly in the same direction. In the square where stood the ancient and stately cathedral the crowd was most dense and most eager, while, within the edifice itself, a large assemblage, composed of grandees and nobles, of dames and demoiselles, as well as of the common people, filled every niche, aisle, and corner. Behind a curtain which separated them from the rest of the assemblage, the young king and Queen of Portugal, surrounded by a select few of the highest dignitaries of the court, had taken their places, and near this curtain you might have seen Vasco and Paulo da Gama and Nicholas Coelho, attired in rich and showy dresses, the observed of all observers. At the high altar of the cathedral stood, arrayed in the brilliant costume of his holy office, the Bishop of Lisbon. He was performing high mass, and his voice alone broke the deep silence that reigned in the cathedral. When he had concluded his prayers, the bishop turned to the assemblage, and told them to pray to God that the voyage of Vasco da Gama might be successful, and went on to utter such praises of the king as were so often sounded in those days from the altars of the churches. The service over, Don Manuel came out from behind the curtain and spoke to the three captains, who kneeled before him, and the courtiers gathered in a close group around them. The whole party then repaired from the cathedral to the royal palace, being cheered and saluted on the way by an immense concourse of people. The time had now come to embark, and soon a procession was formed to proceed to the ships. Vasco da Gama, having kissed the hands of the king and queen, mounted a fine Arab horse, and put himself at the head of the procession. By his side rode Paulo and Nicholas. Behind them marched, 2 by 2, the crews of the ships, handsomely attired in livery. A large number of noblemen, and officers of the court, accompanied the cortege. A body of monks and priests, bearing wax candles, and praying aloud, followed, and throughout the route multitudes of people were gathered, many of them weeping at the perils their relatives or friends, the sailors, were about to encounter, others blessing and cheering them on with loud voices. Arrived at the wharf where the ships lay moored, they found them gaily decked out with ribbons, standards, and flags, and, when Vasco da Gama appeared, a salvo of artillery welcomed him to the command of his little fleet. The streets and houses near the wharf were occupied by dense and excited crowds, who filled the roofs and balconies, and were closely packed together down to the water's edge, and so many